It's spinning. All right, we are live.
Awesome.
All right, it's what is it? Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday.
Yeah.
July 7th, 7/7. And we're live from Columbus, Ohio and Denver, Colorado. And we're going to talk about shooting stuff and not shooting stuff. Yeah, that's kind of our plan.
Got some good stories for today. This is our defensive gun use or justified saves for you guys to follow along. So, it's always a favorite.
Stories. This is an interesting episode title. I found this quote in one of our news stories, and I thought it was pretty wild. So I had a bullet in my chest, and I pulled it out. You look forward to the news story where that happens. It's a pretty wild one. Kind of an interesting thing. Today we're going to share two different stories where a man and a woman were together, and the woman saves the man.
Yep.
So that's kind of cool. Welcome, Cammie, Christian, Hopper, Tony, John, and this Matthew guy. Thank you all for being here. We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna go live in 2 minutes. See, when Riley's not here, we do this stuff on time. So that means that we're gonna go live in now 1 minute at noon Mountain Time. Wes, welcome. Working from home. Working from home is great. You get to catch us live. That's not such a bad deal. Oh, Hopper says it's Tris. So Tris is signed into some random other account, or he changed his name and now he's Hopper Myers. Either way, welcome, Tris.
Or really is.
Hopper, yeah. Chad, nice. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Okay, Matt Dalton's here. Joe is here. A lot of people logged in. We're up to 41 people live according to the fancy little thing on my screen. So today's going to be DGUs. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 news stories to cover. And like I said, a couple of these pretty crazy. If any of you are bikers, you like to go out on your bike to exercise or for entertainment, we got a pretty wild one from bikes today. Welcome, Caroline and Ryan. On time is for responsible people. Okay, Ryan, I think I'll own that. Appreciate the okay, it's noon. We gotta do this. All right. You ready, Matthew?
I'm ready.
All right, here it goes, folks. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode 431. Welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Jacob Paulson, and today I am joined by producer Matthew Marister.
Good afternoon, Jacob Paulson.
Good afternoon. Today, we're going to bring you our Justified Saves episode of the month. And later today, we'll also announce our giveaway winner of the week. All this and more on the Concealed Carry Podcast. But first, right now we're supposed to talk about sponsors, but I'm actually going to derail this just a little bit. Today, I got around to getting caught up on all of our reviews on iTunes. Matthew, do you ever read the reviews people leave us?
Every once in a while, I go on there and I check them out.
Yeah, it had been a few months, to be honest. And so I went and checked. And we got one guy who's really upset with us. He says that, quote, he calls it a sad political show. And then, quote, they keep bashing laws and democracy. They think Democrats are the devil. They take guns. No one is taking guns. Did Obama take your guns? No, we need laws. It's sad to see the narrow views of some gun owners. I guess you're pro-life, but also carry an Uzi, LOL. I hope you are for women's rights as much as you are for gun laws. So Philly BNYR, I apologize if we came off in any way as being a political show, anti-Democrat, or anything like that. We definitely are anti-gun control. Right, Matthew? We're pretty on record there.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. But we, support legislation and we support candidates who support our gun rights. And we, feel that way. Yeah. But that's an outlier. We got a lot of positive reviews on here. Thank you, ERM Ware, who gave us 5 stars. He said, great firearm information shared. Then he did ask, he said, stop dropping 2 shows in one day. I hear you, and we're going to stop doing that. Here's another one from 122211453. He says, awesome. As a future gun owner, I'm now 3 episodes deep and have learned something new in each episode. Lousdale says, a must listen to EDC. Great podcast. These guys are pretty funny yet very informative. I don't think we're funny, but maybe other people think we're funny. Funny looking. Derek141 says that episode 410 was one of the best episodes ever. I read that, Derek, and I had to go look it up. That's the interview with George Harris. Thank you for your review. And many more. If you guys haven't already left us a review on iTunes, please do that. We really appreciate it. Obviously helps us also find new listeners when people are searching iTunes and deciding who to listen to. So there you go. Much appreciated for all of you who have done that. And by the way, if you've already left us a review, you can always go back and leave a second review. You can update your original one or just outright write a second new review. And that would be totally acceptable. All right, now on to today's sponsors. First, Matthew, tell us about CCW Safe.
CCW Safe. This is a network of great prior law enforcement prosecutor or defense attorneys, very knowledgeable in self-defense law and everything that goes into it. What's referred to oftentimes as self-defense insurance. They offer a product, basically putting this team of great minds together to come to your defense if you're involved in a shooting. And so, immediately after you get in a shooting, lots of things start happening. And if you don't have a good team, it can cause a lot of heartache. So CCW Safe's awesome company. We know the guys personally, so full disclosure there. But awesome company. You wouldn't want, I don't know about you, Jacob, but I couldn't think of a better group of people if I was compiling a team to defend me in court, if I had to go to court, than the guys at CCW Safe. Yeah,
correct. Ditto. Yes. If something bad happens and someone's going to come to my rescue, I want those people. I want that team. I want people who, when I call that 1-800 number and say I'm in trouble, the person who answers that phone has shot someone and been to court. And it's, you want them on your side. Guys, go check it out, ccwsafe.com. And you can use coupon code CC Podcast, all one word, just the letters CC Podcast, to save on your membership there. So check it out, ccwsafe.com. And if you want to compare them with all the other competitors out there in the industry, many of which are also very viable and good options, you can do that at concealedcarry.com/insurance. Today's episode is also brought to you by our Fighting from Cover video course. I cannot overemphasize enough how important the proper use of cover is in a gunfight. I think that there's virtually I shouldn't say none, but there's a very low percentage of gunfights out there where use of cover is not a factor in the outcome. And you'll see that as we review all these stories today of gunfights. So if your education in how to properly use cover is limited to somebody telling you the difference between concealment and cover, and then a 30-minute lecture on a gun range with a couple big blue barrels, I assure you that was not enough. So go to concealedcarry.com/FFC, standing for Fighting from Cover, and pick up your copy today. Available both in DVD format and online streaming. All right, that's the sponsor messages, which several people on iTunes say they wish that we didn't have them, but then, how would we make money and do this? So, we're going to have sponsor messages. All right, Matthew, story number one.
All right,
Eaton County.
Yeah, so this is our entry, our little, kind of opening story here. Eaton County sheriffs confirm identity of person shot in Delta Township. Now, this is kind of a weird story. This happened on the 17th. June 17th.
June 17th.
And so around 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, sheriff's deputies get a call of a dude that's walking down the street, the middle of the street.
Some big highway, I think.
Yeah, it's
Saginaw Highway. Yeah.
Saginaw Highway. I don't know. It looked on the video, maybe it's like a 2 lanes in either direction. But so this guy's walking down the center of this highway, firing off rounds into the air, as cars are, stopped on this street or highway. He's seen pointing the gun at different people in vehicles, different cars, not shooting anybody at anybody, but just shooting off rounds in the air. The story actually has a couple of the 911 calls that come in. So if you follow the show notes, we'll put that link in there and you can listen to the 911 calls. Really good information that are given by the witnesses. they're describing the person who's firing off these rounds, trying to get an idea of, what's going on with this guy. And eventually he points the gun at somebody in a vehicle, who says, I kind of feel like my life is at risk. And he exits his vehicle and shoots this guy and kills him. He's a concealed.
An important clarification, Matthew. I think it said, I'm looking for it. Okay, it said the gunman stopped in front of his vehicle.
Right. So it
wasn't just that a passerby got a gun pointed at them, but that the BG stood in front of the vehicle that stopped.
Yep. Good point. So he stops this vehicle's ability to continue to go forward, and obviously this guy's shooting rounds in the air, so it's not the danger that this person perceives is reasonable based off of, this guy is actually shooting rounds into the air. He's pointing it at everybody. He steps in front of my car, points the gun at me. He gets out, the driver, concealed carrier, pulls his firearm and shoots the guy and kills him. So they're investigating it, but for everything that it seems, from the information that we get from the story here, seems like a pretty cut and dry self-defense. People can argue, one way or the other. I guess, Jacob, you could kind of go off of this, but I know some people will say, well, couldn't he have driven away? Right. And that'd be the argument. So what would you say, Jacob? I mean,
yeah, so we're in the state of Michigan. I don't know if Michigan has a duty to retreat. So that would be the potential legal concern if we're talking about the law here. Are you the innocent party? Yeah, definitely. Is the threat imminent? For sure. Dude's standing in front of my car, pointing a gun at me. He's shooting it off into the air. Is the threat proportional? Yep, he's got a gun for sure. Is my interpretation of these events all reasonable? Yeah, I think any average 6 to 12 man jury would agree. So the question mark here, if there's a legal question mark, would be one of duty retreat avoidance. I don't know off the top of my head. I could pull up our app. I could go download the Concealed Carry Gun Tools app, guys. I could go check out the Michigan legal summary and see if it's one of the 13 states in this country that have a duty to retreat. If it is, and the car is not considered a part of the home, therefore castle doctrine, then arguably the man needed to retreat if safely able. And yeah, then argument could be made, to your point, Matthew, that in a vehicle I could have put the car in reverse, or I could have swerved to avoid him, or done something to retreat from this threat. But that aside, assuming avoidance is a non-issue, either because Michigan doesn't have a duty to retreat, or because we all, you want to argue the idea that a person just can't, safely retreat from the threat when someone's standing in front of their vehicle and you're in the middle of a highway. Either way, I'd say that this is a pretty clean legal shoot. Yeah. Now, then we have to look at tactics. Well, is this the best thing? Could I have just driven past? Could I have potentially escaped and not had to fire a gun? All that is a potential valid argument. Let's just assume, though, just for fun, so we can kind of progress, that person couldn't have retreated in any way, tactically or lawfully, and therefore they had to deal with the threat in front of them. Well, that leaves you then with two options. One would be to move forward and run the dude over, hit him with the car, or what this person chose to do, which is return fire with the gun. Yeah, and that's where I'm a little bit at a kind of a loss. I think, in hindsight, I'd love to. I don't know if I would have had the wits about me at the time, but I think in hindsight, the better choice is to hit the dude with the car, for a couple of reasons. One is it doesn't endanger anyone else. I don't have to worry about bullets flying. I don't have to worry about, over penetration or missing stuff in a busy highway where there's other people around. If I just hit the dude with my car, he's the only one at risk. So that's probably preferable. But yeah. And then we have the idea that the guy very clearly, according to the story, opened the door, stepped out and took fire. And that would be another potential, tactical discussion.
Yeah. And those are all good points, because we don't know what was in front of the car, right? He could have been stopped and there was a car 5 feet in front. So he couldn't have, successfully run him over, but there is
a car behind him. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, there is that. And so we don't know every single, aspect of the situation, but it is good to think about that, because getting out of your vehicle, right, takes time. If this guy already has a gun pointed at you, getting out of your vehicle and drawing, that takes time. So potentially, if you had the ability to, hit the gas, and sure, people can fire rounds in through the vehicle. But you make those decisions, those split-second decisions. So neither one of us is obviously saying that this is not a justified shooting or that he did anything wrong, just kind of expanding the thought of, hey, using your vehicle to drive over this person is using deadly force, no different than shooting the guy. So if it's more applicable, or if it gives you an advantage to stay in the vehicle, then that might be something to think about.
Yeah. In our vehicle firearm tactics course, which you can find at concealedcarry.com/VFT, we talk about kind of the 4 priorities that you need to, I guess, think through, in that kind of situation. Option 1, priority number 1 is always escape with the vehicle if possible. Number 2, use the vehicle as a weapon if possible. Number 3, bail out and fight. And number 4, shoot in order to bail out and fight. So in this case, it looks like the person decided to go to number 3, whether that was just because what they thought was best, or if they were unable to do number 1 and number 2. But anyway, some good, tactical and legal considerations there. All around, seems like a clean shoot to me. And awesome.
Yeah, and Randy asks, what about protecting other citizens? Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a consideration, right? He's shooting fire rounds into the air. Pointing the gun at random people. Sure, even if he took the gun off of you and was pointing it at a vehicle occupied by people right next to you, you'd still have that reasonable belief that force that he's using against those people is likely to cause death or serious bodily injury. So that's obviously something to consider for sure.
Yeah, and it has dramatic impact on the whole duty to retreat concept. If Michigan were a duty to retreat state, you only have to retreat if you're safely able, and that not just you, but also anyone who's in threat. So the duty to retreat element would, in this case, I'm glad you brought this up because it actually changes my thinking on this, because not only would I have to be able to safely retreat, but I'd have to be able to get all the other innocent parties who are in danger to retreat. And I obviously, in a roadway, I can't go isolate all 100 people within a 25 meter whatever and get them all to retreat simultaneously. So that's a super valid comment. One other just interesting thing. I was listening to the 911 calls recordings from this. A lot of people called in, but the dispatcher asks one person, what kind of gun is it? And I just thought that was a really poorly worded question, Matthew. If you and I are ever working for dispatch, let's just say, is it a handgun or a rifle?
Right.
Because what kind of gun is it? The guy who was calling in was like, I don't know what kind of gun it is.
It's loud.
Like, looks like this could be an M&P, maybe a Walther. Like what the crap. So anyway, just funny little side note there on the dispatch there. Okay, we're moving on. We're now going to, I don't know, some hospital somewhere in Chicago. Is it Chicago? I think it's Chicago.
This happened in Indiana.
Northwest Indiana. Okay, yep. Munster Community Hospital in Lake County, Indiana. Okay, so let's see if I got this right. You got a patient who is not doing great. It says he's a psychiatric patient, so less than stable. And he starts, saying some things or threatening the nurse in a way that's less than awesome. So security is called at the hospital, and 2 security guards show up. At least one of them is armed. I presume both of them are probably armed. No, for sure, they are both armed. Okay, so 2 armed security officers show up. They're both retired sheriff's deputies from the county, so they've both been in law enforcement. Upon entering the room, the patient decides, this is not cool. You just escalated this, and he gets violent. He starts attacking the nurse, and it's not going well. So these 2 security officers, they manage to get the nurse free from the patient. But in the struggle, the patient grabs one of these security officers into a chokehold. And I'm imagining almost like hostage situation where, I got, BG's got the guy in a chokehold, and that the good guy in the chokehold is between the BG and the other good guy. Okay. So the other security officer who's not in a chokehold draws his gun. And obviously to deploy this gun is going to be pretty sucky, right? It's a total hostage kind of shot. But he does at some point. He determines it's necessary. It says that the guy who was in the chokehold, the other good guy was losing consciousness and it was getting serious. He was also getting hit. In addition to being in the chokehold, the guy, the BG was like, busting this dude up. So, he decides to fire. He fires at least 2 rounds, according to one version of the story. and one of those rounds hits the BG in the face, and the other round hits the good guy security officer who was previously in the chokehold. It goes through an arm and into the chest. Both the security officer who was in the chokehold and the bad guy die at the scene in a hospital, which is interesting. We'll come back to that, I'm sure. So, Matthew, what are some of your initial thoughts?
Yeah, this is one of those things where, you know, a lot of us aren't security guards, so it's like it's easy to kind of say, well, I'm not going to be in this situation guarding some psychiatric patient. But let's say somebody comes into your home and has your, you know, wife, child, husband, whatever, in a chokehold on the bed or whatever, and you walk into that. So same kind of scenario where it's very close proximity, where your ability to take shots may be diminished completely, right? Based off of how these people are moving, where they're rolling. And this is where we kind of talk about the context of contact shots, right? Like where the gun is very close up against the tacker. So, you know, you have the ability to kind of dictate where that round is going to go and where it's not going to go to your best ability. It's one of those scary things, and you know, I know firsthand dealing with, you know, psychiatric patients, especially in hospitals and things, when you have prisoners that you're taking in the hospital. Officers in there and the security guards, they're kind of on their own, because a lot of hospitals, the radios won't get transmit out of the hospital. It's really, you know, sometimes you have to get on the phone, and so they're basically on their own with this dude. And you know, you'd think that having a staff of medical workers in there to help control this guy, oftentimes it's just not the case. There's closed, confined little areas. So it's just one of those things where I think I hate to, like, you know, say second guess somebody's decision, but I'm sure he's going through the thought process of what could I have done differently. And I think that's what we need to focus on, is what could have been done differently. So, you know, these dynamic situations where you have a window of shooting that's, you know, an index card, and it's moving around very rapidly. And if you miss, it's not just, hey, I missed the target. It's I kill somebody who shouldn't be killed. It's a situation that we hope we never get into, but you got to be in the mindset of, when can I use a contact shot and what are the considerations?
Yeah. To add some context, this might help some of the people who are listening. The BG, in this case, the patient who is doing all the bad stuff, is 22 years old. I don't know how big or tall or tough or whatever, but he's 22. Okay. The two security officers, responding officers, who are veteran law enforcement officers, are respectively 59 and 65. The 59-year-old is the one who died. The 65-year-old is the one who fired shots. So I don't know if that puts it into any sort of context. You know, I'm somewhere in the middle. Today I'm 37 years old. Matthew's a little higher up than that than me. And I think, you know, we do have to have some context for, is going hands-on going to work out real well? There's a version of this story too, a couple of things to consider. One, you know, the BG doesn't have a weapon per se, but could he quickly access the gun that's on the hip of the officer he's choking out? Probably could. In fact, one version of the story, which I think the way I read it, I don't think it's the likely version, but there's at least one version of the story where the BG drew the gun off of the officer he was choking, and he's the one who shot that officer. And that version of the story would suggest then that the other officer then only fired one shot, and it was the shot that hit the BG. That doesn't sound likely, but it, you know, at least someone reported that at some point. The point is, at the very least, there's an imminent threat of deadly force if the guy is choking out one guy and has direct access to the gun on his hip. So that's also a consideration. But going hands-on in that environment, it's pretty sucky. Not to say I've ever done it. Matthew, you know, you're a 5 foot, not much guy who has been on patrol, and I got to believe that these are tough decisions. You know, do I want to go hands-on where I got to worry about retaining the gun on my hip? I got to worry about retaining the gun on my partner's hip, and we got to somehow deal with this. And we already went hands-on to get the nurse peeled off of this dude. At that point,
Right.
it was 2 against 1. But now my fellow officer is about unconscious. And if I go hands on, am I going to be able to do what needs to be done? I think it's a tough decision. And the contact shot is equally ugly and tough. I mean, the second I get my gun within arm's reach of that BG, odds get real high. BG is going to grab gun. And now I'm fighting over my gun. That sounds like much worse than the situation I was in a moment ago. So I just think that we got to be conscientious of that. I think we have to be thoughtful about this not being very black and white. It's a bit of an ugly one. I mean, another potential outcome here would be, hey, dude's choking out my buddy. He's going to go unconscious. Let it go. Like, that's not long-term damaging. But the second I see him reach for my partner's gun, the second he starts stepping toward me, second he starts doing, maybe that's the moment I have to fire. But getting my gun out and having it prepared and ready and issuing verbal commands, hopefully short strokes my delay to act later. It also gives me time to get a really nice dialed in accurate shot. I don't think there's a lot of speed required. If I'm picturing like your average hostage situation where like you stand there, I stand here, you have no weapon, I do. All you're doing is choking somebody out. I should be able to take my time and really get a nice, good, accurate shot. And to me, that's probably a preferable plan to rushing in there hands on and trying to do a contact shot, or where I risk being in a battle over my gun.
Yeah, and it's all. I think what we think about what we should think about is our own ability. Like, what is our own ability today to defend against somebody who may be physically stronger than us, right? Like, or physically stronger than the person that they're attacking, our spouse or our child or whatever it might be, the person we're out at dinner with. And so what are our abilities physically, like, to go hands on? What can we do realistically? Like, when we do our what if scenarios and somebody says, well, I'll go hands on and I'll take them down and this and that. And it's like, well, do you have those abilities? Like, do you physically train? Do you do these things? And if not, if you're maybe, I mean, both of these guys were, I hesitate to say elderly, but they're older, right? So maybe their physical abilities to go hands on are diminished. And so it takes away some of the tools that you can use, but we should still all know what the tools we have, right? You might still be able to go hands-on with certain attackers, and maybe some you can't, and some you have to go to a gun. And it's just, you have to know your abilities. And I think that that's one of those things where if we don't have a context when we're training, or we don't have some sort of metric, and someone's like, well, I train all the day, all the time, I shoot tons of rounds. It's like, well, okay, is there any connection to your abilities? Like, how are you testing your ability to do X, Y, and Z? Because if not, you're just a good shooter. What does that mean? And so I think this kind of exposes those weaknesses, where it's not just a standoff position where you just have to apply the fundamentals. A lot goes into the decision-making process on this one.
Yep. Well said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does not sound super fun to me to go hands-on in that environment. That sounds really nasty. And I'm not, 59 or 65.
All right.
But it still might cross the line for me in terms of what I think is viable and safe. One last thought, and I'm just going to throw this out kind of crazy, but when you were on patrol, Matthew, did you use a type 3 retention holster?
I had the first department we had to, and then I went to a level 1, just because I didn't like all the snaps and stuff like that. So I went to a level 1.
That would be another determining factor for me. Like, how able am I to retain this gun? If I go in there with a gun on my hip and I start throwing punches, like, how concerned do I got to be about that gun? Me losing control of it. So something else to consider. I don't know what kind of holsters these security officers were using, but it's a viable consideration.
Absolutely.
All right. Now we're going to, I don't know, Channel 9 somewhere. Oklahoma City. Is that it? Yeah.
Yep. Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. Pregnant woman shoots intruder at Northwest Oklahoma City apartment. So this is a pretty short and sweet one. Here, let me see if I can give us the narrative. Okay. Woman's at home. Someone knocks on door. She doesn't answer. I don't know if she looked at the people and saw who it was, but just for whatever reason, she did not answer it. Sometime later, we don't know how much longer later, but sometime later, a woman takes her dog out for a walk. When she comes back to her apartment from walking the dog, the man who previously had knocked on her door returns and tries to force his way inside. The woman retrieved a gun and shot the suspect in the shoulder. He was taken into custody. The woman was uninjured. What do you make of this one, Matthew?
Yeah, and this is a short, synopsis, but the real important thing here, and the reason why I included it, was one, the importance of maybe having a layered approach to your home or apartment. It's an apartment here, so the ability to probably put up outdoor cameras and things like that, or have a Ring doorbell type camera or something, might be limited. But this is one of those things where, you see someone knocks on your door, you're like, okay, I'm not going to answer it. But this person's laying in waiting for you to come out. And whether or not this person knew that this woman lived there alone, or would assume that she would be alone and taking her dog out, maybe it's one of the other people that are in the apartment and they kind of know her routine or whatnot. But this is one of those areas times where you could see, hey, you look at your camera, your phone, and say, I don't know who this dude is. And you see him, kind of walk off the property or go into another area or not. And so it's just one of those things where, we kind of have these little cues that sometimes we just brush off, right? Like, dude knocks on the door, nobody's there, I'm not going to answer it. And you kind of brush it off, and it's like, hey, no big deal. 'Cause 99% of the time it is no big deal. This time, woman, comes back, and dude is waiting for it, right? So lock your doors, even when you just run to take your dog out really quickly. That's number one. Number two, if she would have had the firearm on her, obviously everything worked out well in this case, but it could have been bad if she couldn't have gotten to that gun. So maybe when you go to take your dog out or whatnot, you have your firearm with you, just because you never know. You never know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good thoughts. The second thought is, don't have a wussy dog. If you're going to get a dog, like get a serious dog. Get the kind of dog that someone's watching you walk and saying, I do not want to mess with that person. They got that dog. So, I guess I had to bring that up. I have no idea what kind of, for all we know, she had some serious, beefy, scary looking dog. I really don't know. But yeah, the gun on you, broken record thing for sure. The apartment concern also for sure. And transitionary spaces, I guess I'll leave you with this thought. Think about your life, your average daily life, and think about, what are my transitional spaces? What are the places where I am most at risk? And in the case of an apartment, when I come in and out of my door, when I'm going up and down those stairs, maybe that kind of environment in my apartment building complex, those are transitionary spaces where your risk is elevated. Maybe it's in the parking garage at work. When I'm in and out of my car and getting into the building. Think about all your transitionary spaces and the places where your risk is the most elevated. And you just maybe need to do a little bit extra diligence about how you're going to manage those spaces if you are going to, decrease your risk. My other thought here is that this seems to be a targeted random incident. And by targeted random, I mean, it would appear that the woman does not know her attacker, but very clearly, she was targeted by this man. Mm-hmm. He came back, right? He knocked on that door originally, then he came back later. So he wasn't just looking for loose doorknobs, it would seem that this woman was targeted. And so you can't presume that because you don't, you live in a good neighborhood, or because you don't, have death threats coming, or there's no, creepy dudes, calling you all the time, whatever. Like, you can't presume all is well and fine. Sometimes you can be the random target of an attack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tony comments here and just says that his dog would lick his dead carcass and then run away. Tony, dogs are sweet, wonderful animals. And sometimes, that's just as far as it goes. Okay. Let's go. I don't know if we mentioned this. I should have brought it up, but the woman in this story was pregnant, or is
mm-hmm.
pregnant. that is somewhat viable in terms of, if you have a concern about proportionality and her use of force. Her being pregnant, I think, elevates that
Sure.
To some degree. And maybe also suggest, an environment where she's less likely to carry her gun on her. Maybe she's wearing different clothing than normal, or it's less comfortable or heavy or whatever, and all those kinds of things too.
Yeah.
All right. Should we go to the bikes?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. This is Fox Detroit. Lay it down for us, Matthew.
So Detroit, known for its good food and windy cities. Let's see. So bicycle shoots SUV driver armed with knife dead in downtown Detroit road rage confrontation. So here's the story. A couple bicyclists are riding down the street, husband and wife, or guy and girlfriend. I think it's his wife, girlfriend. They're riding down the street. SUV either cuts them off or they cut off the SUV, whatever the case is. They get into a verbal just kind of argument as they're riding down the street. Dude in the SUV decides, hey, I might as well get out and confront these guys, pulls his vehicle over to the side of the road, gets out of his SUV, armed with a knife, approaches the boyfriend of the two couples that are the couple that's riding their bike. Girlfriend draws her firearm that she's carrying and shoots the guy. And it's pretty interesting because she ends up getting arrested. But later in the story, it says that they believe that this is a justifiable homicide, justifiable shooting, self-defense shooting, whatever you want to classify it as. But she was arrested on scene. So not sure. It says there's still police footage there's surveillance footage from the area. So they're probably reviewing that to see exactly what's going on. But it's weird because it says police sources say they believe this was likely a case of justifiable homicide and that the woman had the legal right to use lethal force. However, they arrested her on scene, and it goes on to say the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office will have the final say on charges. So not sure exactly why they arrested her. But yeah, that's how it played out.
So I think that, from a legal perspective, to your point, it seems pretty cut and dry. Dude with knife walks toward you shouting threats. Like that seems like, a pretty imminent deadly force kind of threat. And your, use of a gun in defense of that threat seems pretty viable in my mind. Whether or not you're the innocent party or not, maybe, could be argued if you were the one who started shouting threats and things, but that's probably pretty irrelevant in this case because the first physical part of the confrontation was when the knife was produced and the man moved toward them with that knife. So that all seems good. In terms of tactics, it's a little bit of a tough one, right? Because I think, and this is important to note, because you're together with someone else. Because if you were by yourself, right? If I was the guy on the bike and I was on my own and this dude with a knife walked toward me, turn bike around, pedal hard, it seems so obvious and easy to escape this confrontation. There's so many places bikes can go that cars can't. It should just be really painless. But if you're the girlfriend and you're with your boyfriend and you both stopped and this dude's walking toward with your knife, you don't have the same amount of control over the person who's with you. You can say something, and maybe she did. Maybe she said, "Let's go. Let's get out of here. Let's bounce." We don't know the distance either. How far away this person was when they first saw him, and as he started walking toward with the knife. Maybe they came around a corner, and he, I don't know, right? But I guess it's worth, in my mind, the thing I'm taking away from this for me is if I'm with other people, it decreases my ability to escape from the threat because I now have to get all these people to bail out with me at the same time. We all have to get away. And I may not be able to control that. And I'm certainly not willing, depending on the people, to abandon them to save myself. So in this case, it might become more necessary, or we might more easily justify the tactics of standing to fight versus attempting to escape from the threat, if that's what's necessary to protect you and the others you're with. So just a thought there for any of us as we think through these scenarios. It's one thing if I'm on my own, I can try and get away. I can try to avoid conflict, right? But if I'm with somebody else, my ability to do that might be greatly decreased.
Yeah. Yep.
That was my only thing to add.
Yeah, totally appropriate. I mean, I look at things differently, situations differently if I have my family with me or not. So,
Yeah.
it's a different equation when you have somebody with you. And so, and this is one of those cautionary tales of, you don't know which little, argument, road rage incident is going to turn into a deadly force shooting or you getting injured or whatnot. I mean, this guy could have just as easily gotten out with the firearm, right? And so
Right. Sure.
it's like one of those things where we sometimes, it's hard because you should be able to say, hey, dude, like riding your bike, hey, man, you cut me off, right? And not it end up into some sort of shooting, right? Like you would say, that would be reasonable that I could say, hey, I should be able to say that, right? But you just don't know. And sometimes it's just like, you just got to go the other way. You just have to. And it's hard, like you said, with other people there. It's hard. And I'm sure this woman didn't plan on shooting anybody, but she had her firearm on a bike ride, which probably a lot of people might not do, right? Like, hey, I don't want to carry my gun while I'm riding my bike because I don't wear a belt and holsters and stuff like that. She obviously found a way to do it. It doesn't say in the story, how she was carrying it or whatnot, but she did have her firearm, which is an important, component of the story here.
Yeah, valid. Well, last thought before we move on from this one is, for those of you who like to ride your bike around, man, just choose, would you? Are you a car or are you a bike? And I'm not a bike guy, and so I get away with saying rude things like this. But I support riding a bike around. Sounds like it's good for the body, good for the environment, and all that jazz. So, like, props to all you listeners who do that. But man, I wish you could choose a side. Like, I do get frustrated as a driver with bicyclists who in one moment decide they're a vehicle and the next second decide no, that they're on a bike. Like, it's like when it's convenient, I want you to treat me like I'm a car. But when it's not convenient, I just get to do whatever I want. Like, yeah. I get to go through red lights and I get to hop up on this sidewalk and, but then no, now in this moment, I get to be in your lane and you have to wait behind me and I'm going to, signal and turn. So I don't know, Jacob's personal little thing there. I got beef with bicyclists who pick a side.
So don't ride your bike around Jacob's house because you're likely to get in a road rage incident with it.
It's gonna be fine. It's one of those like Jacob frustrations. Like if you want to be treated like a car, follow car rules. If you don't want to follow car rules, then we're gonna treat you like a bike. Okay. Either way, I'm not gonna get out and try and knife you. All right, we're going to Indianapolis, back to Indiana again.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so let's see if I can give the narrative here. You got a bunch of teenage boys who are walking around downtown Indianapolis causing some drama. In fact, it says at some point in here that officers were patrolling nearby after receiving multiple disturbance calls. So these teenagers were not being awesome, upstanding citizens. Okay. At one point, one or more of these teenagers attempts to rob a man. And when they try and do that, the man being robbed, the good guy in this case, draws and fires and shoots the teenager, 14-year-old boy. And 14-year-old boy is now dead. So it's a little bit rough. It says that the shooter is cooperating with investigators. And it said that there's actually a bunch of statistics in here. Maybe we'll get to that kind of at the end of after we talk about the incident. We don't have a lot of information about the actual incident itself, other than we presume that the person who was the victim, fired a gun and shot the 14-year-old. 14-year-old is dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and here's the thing. I mean, in the story, it doesn't say that if it was a strong arm robbery or if it was an armed robbery where the 14-year-old had a knife or a gun. We don't know. And so, and we actually don't even know much about the shooter, how old he was, maybe he was in a wheelchair, who knows, right? Could be an elderly guy in a wheelchair who can't really move. But all those things kind of factor into the reasonableness and the proportionality of the force being used. And so we don't know if this is a monster 14-year-old that's probably, like most 14-year-olds, taller than me, or, you know, if this is a 14-year-old that looks like a 14-year-old and carrying around a stuffed animal. Probably not, right? Like, it's probably he's out there menacing other people in the area. It also goes to the mindset of the one who was robbed, the victim, that they go through and list, there's been 76 homicides in the area since June 29th, 2019. So the area is probably not the greatest. And so when you're being robbed in an area that's, you know, has a lot of shootings and things like that, probably that factors into your state of mind, right? Like, not to say it's the only thing, but it's definitely something that factors in. So
it's a homicide every 4.6 days.
Yeah. So you don't want to be that, you know, dude on the fourth day that, you know, hasn't had a homicide. But I just think it's important to understand, like, kids, you know, 14-year-old kids can obviously, we've covered many stories where young kids were the ones that were robbing people at gunpoint, breaking into homes and home invasions with guns, you know? So it's not to say that they shouldn't be treated differently than adults, but obviously, I mean, if you can avoid shooting such a young kid, even if, you know, he's out there robbing people, I think, you know, it's one of those things where we've all done stupid stuff as kids, especially as a 14-year-old kid. Maybe weren't all out robbing people, but you know, it's just one of those things that society, it's kind of degrading, and we just have to be alert and make prudent decisions when we use our firearm, because it's sometimes, you know, it's going to be the last decision that kid ever makes or person ever makes. So yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to some of the interesting statistics. The person who reported on this in the Indy Star, they added a bunch of homicide related data for 2019 and 2020. And they did something really amazingly intelligent. And that is that they made it clear that the word homicide can apply to both a illegal shooting, which results in someone's death, as well as a legal shooting that results in someone's death, such as self-defense, which this one most likely would fall into that latter category. And so they say, for example, homicides are up 40% in this patrol area compared to the same time last year. There have been 107 homicides in 2020. 91 are being investigated as criminal cases. The other 16 are believed to be non-criminal homicides, such as self-defense or accidental shootings. So non-criminal, again, that could include, you know, an accidental discharge of a gun, or it could be, you know, straight up self-defense. That's 15%, by the way. That's right. It's like 14.9 or something like that percent of the homicides in that time period in this patrol area are non-criminal. So 15%. I just thought that was interesting. We've seen a lot of research bounce around over time that would suggest that anywhere from 15 to maybe as much as like 30% of homicides in this country are justified. But it goes to show you that if this reporter hadn't added that little kind of side note, then you would never have known. You would have just seen the word homicide, and the average person for sure would never distinguish that it's some percentage of those are justified. You would just see that and say, oh my gosh, that's a lot of criminal murders, you know? And so it's just, I guess, a good reminder to me that we need to be cautious when we see data and statistics. We're coming up on an election season, so many stats are going to be thrown around with weight, and someone's going to talk about gun violence and all the people who die at the hands of guns. And when they do that, they're not going to distinguish. They won't. They will not distinguish that a large, or I shouldn't say large, but a percentage that is significant of those were self-defense, were DGUs, were justified. So you keep that in mind when some of those stats start getting thrown around here as we get closer to the election.
Good point.
Okay. We're going to the story that generated the title of today's episode. And let's see, where is this one? Where are we?
Shreveport, Louisiana.
Shreveport, Louisiana. Our listeners in Louisiana, Shreveport. We've seen a lot of stories out of Shreveport. I get the sense it's not the safest part of the country. Okay.
I don't know.
No comment from Matthew. He's politically correct. He doesn't want to piss anyone off.
Well, we just got to. Somebody was saying it's a political show, so I'm staying out of it.
That's right. Watch out for those politics. I just didn't know we were so political. Okay. Here we go. The headline here is sister pulls out gun and saves her brother from would-be robbers. This one is crazy. Straight up intense. Let's see if I can create the narrative here. And Matthew, you jump in and correct me if I get anything wrong. But here's how I read it. Brother and sister are in a garage working on a Jeep. The sister is inside the Jeep. It says she's playing with the radio. Apparently cars still have radios. And the brother, I get the impression he's not sitting in the Jeep, that like he's on the outside. Maybe he's got the door open, but he's like working on it somehow. But he's in the garage, right? They're both in the garage. And two male attackers come into the garage, and it says, quote, rushed up to him shouting, "Where's the money?" Okay. One of these attackers grabs the brother by the arm, and the other one grabbed him by the head, and they went to, quote, walk me into the house. Okay. While this is happening, the younger sister, who's sitting in the Jeep playing with the radio, she draws her gun, which she clearly had on her, and fired on the men attacking her brother, striking one of them and holding that one at gunpoint until police arrive. And then I think somewhere later, yeah, that's right. Later they did arrest the second perpetrator. So both of them are in custody now. Now, when she fires on one of the bad guys, they fire back. So shots do go back and forth. And in addition to one of the BGs being struck with a bullet, her brother is also shot. And according to the brother, quote, I looked down and I had a bullet in my chest and I pulled it out myself. I was like, I see it. So I just pulled it out myself, end quote. And that's about the end of the narrative. So Matthew, what do you have to say about that one?
Yeah, there's a couple things that were striking, and I'll hit the first one about him pulling the bullet out of his chest, right? Or out of, I think it says his chest, right? Or
that's what it said.
In his chest, right? So we always talk about what the best caliber for defensive handgun, and people can argue about 40, 45, 9mm, 3.8, all this stuff, right? It all boils down to penetration. If this round would have penetrated deep enough where this kid couldn't have pulled the bullet out of his chest, he wouldn't have been able to pull the bullet out of the chest and likely would have suffered more damaging injury, right? More catastrophic, a worse injury. So I don't know what kind of, gun this was, but I can, if it wasn't deflected off of something, right? If it didn't deflect off of the car or something like that, hit the ground and bounce up or something, then it probably wasn't a high velocity round. And so, think about that when you're carrying your firearms. Why, some people will say, well, carry anything, it's better than nothing. Well, it's better than nothing. But if those are your only two options, but there are options in between of nothing and, your, Derringer single shot pistol, right? So, if this guy can pull a bullet out of his chest and have the wherewithal to do that, then certainly somebody who's attacking you and you shoot them with the same caliber that this criminal was using could do the same. So just one of those things that kind of popped in my head is penetration's the key in all your self-defense ammunition decisions. Yeah.
Matt asks, did the sister shoot him? And the answer is, we don't know. We don't know what bullets went and hit who. The odds are the sister did shoot the attacker who was shot, but as to whose bullet hit the brother, we have no idea. It could have been her. It could have been someone else. We do know that it said very clearly there was a shootout. So bullets flew both ways. But as far as like whose bullet impacted the good guy brother, no idea. And whether or not it was a direct impact, to your point, Matthew, or whether or not it was deflected off some other surface, which would, further clarify or perhaps explain why we don't have enough penetration to prevent one from pulling the bullet out themselves.
Right.
That we don't know. None of that is included. What's definitely true is a couple interesting things. One, when dudes run into your garage, grab you by the arm and the head and shout, "Where's the money?" and then try and force you in your house, it's not going to end well. The intentions of those criminals are not passive. It is not a, hey, if it's convenient and no one's going to see us, maybe we'll steal a television. Like, that's not what's happening here. When two dudes with guns grab you by the head, force you in a house where there won't be any witnesses, it's game on. Like, this is super game on time. This is not, and you could see how such a crazy, ridiculous scenario, in hindsight to all of us, is clearly extremely dangerous and bad. In the moment, it just could be confusing. I mean, you could see how you're like, what's going, who, what, and all of a sudden they're, and you could see how, like, there's this delay for your brain to accept that it's go time. Like, it's time to act now. Mm-hmm. But clearly the sister, for her, just at relatively high speed, she decided it was game time. So I think that's pretty awesome and good work. So that's one thought I had, is that this is not going to end well. This is violent. This is scary. This is not good. From our perspective, it looks random, but it could be a mistaken home. Maybe these dudes are drug dealers and they're trying to get, they thought this was a drug house and they got the address wrong. I mean, we don't know, right? It could have been any number of things. Marksmanship we already covered, but I thought I'd bring it up again. Marksmanship becomes really critical in a box. A garage is a concrete box, and it's not a place I want to be when bullets are flying around. Cover is pretty sucky if you have it at all, and bullets bounce off stuff, and it's not good. We don't know if the sister exited the car and then she took fire. We don't know if she exited the car and then took cover and then took. We don't know. We just know that she responded pretty dang immediately before things left the garage into the house. So some pretty heroic actions, I think, from the sister, and good work.
Yeah, I think you hit it in on the head. And the homeowner in the story even says, it says he's glad they had their guns on them and did not panic. And that's one of those things, like you mentioned, she had the wherewithal in her mind to say, there are certain times where compliance works against an attacker and certain times it wouldn't. And you explained it perfectly. Like you get the sense of how these guys rolled up and that they were armed and in their mannerisms, that this wasn't, hey, give me your wallet and I'm going to leave. This was, give me your wallet, and if you don't, I'm going to kill you anyways. And so I think she acted appropriately, didn't panic, had a clear mind to say, this is what I need to do. And that's one of those things that helps make the right decision to shoot, not shoot, and whatnot. So that was, you hit the nail on the head with that one. Yeah.
Crazy stuff. Hey, before I forget, I meant to bring this up, but I wanted to just say something to get the story we talked about earlier with the two security officers in the hospital, hostage situation, 2 men dead. I thought it was just worth coming back. I said we would, and then we didn't. So I feel like I had to bring this up. 2 men died of a gunshot wound in a hospital. And I thought that was extremely interesting and noteworthy. One of them took a shot in the head, the other one in the chest. But despite them being in a hospital, I mean, you can't get closer to critical medical response teams, right? Despite them being in the hospital, they both lost that battle with the gunshot. So I don't know. I guess I just felt like we had to say that out loud just to impress on how that matters. The gunshot placement makes a huge difference. And in that case, even happening in the hospital was not bueno. Yeah. Another interesting thought, Matthew, and I'm just spitballing here. I don't know anything about emergency response inside the hospital, but it could be that hospitals are not well prepared to respond to gunshot wounds somewhere deep inside of the psychiatric ward of the hospital. That might be a challenge. Like, dude shows up in ER off of an ambulance. We got that. We're well trained. We do that every day. But report of someone being shot up in, the north wing, like on the 7th floor, like what the crap do we do? I don't know. Maybe they're all over that. I'm just spitballing that it's probably not the average thing.
Yeah.
Tony comments, "Don't take me to that hospital, please." All right, we got to go to St. George, Utah. And if you live in St. George, I'm sorry. The place, like basically 6 months out of the year, feels like someone's got a hot blow dryer on in your face. But it's a beautiful city, and I'm just teasing. You can live there, but I'm very particular about my climate choices, and so St. George crosses the line into too hot for Jacob. Tell us about St. George, Utah, Matthew.
All right, this is our final story. So St. George, Utah, around 3 a.m., a group of guys break into a pharmacy, Sienna's Pharmacy. And like I said, this happens at 3 a.m. in the morning. There's a pharmacist inside who's in like a back break room. The people breaking in, the men, there's 3 of them breaking in, don't know that there's somebody in the pharmacy. And so the pharmacist hears them before they realize he's in there. He walks out and is like, "Hey, what's going on? I heard something. Is somebody in here?" And he walks out and confronts him. He's actually carrying a firearm, has a concealed handgun license, points a gun at the dudes, and they beat feet and they get out of there. So he calls 911 saying, how are these guys not know that I'm in here, right? Like, I'm standing right here. They don't see me because they're creeping all around. And so basically he scares them off. They drive away. There's one dude's in the vehicle, of course, outside waiting. They jump in the vehicle, drive away, and police eventually stop the vehicle. They catch him and they arrest all 4 of them. But yeah, the pharmacies are one of those things where if you work in a pharmacy or you have a family member who works in a pharmacy, it can be a very dangerous place, especially nowadays where people don't have jobs and they're furloughed, and a lot of it's very dangerous. So one of those things where if you can carry and you're a pharmacist or you have a family member, and it's not against store policy or whatnot, this kind of stuff happens all the time to pharmacists. So people trying to get narcotics and things.
Yeah. So I don't know what pharmacist works at 3 a.m. I thought that was super bizarre, like just to the point of like ridiculous. Like, what? Like, what the crap are you doing there at 3 a.m, bro? But maybe he's conducting his annual inventory. I don't know, but I just thought that was so weird. The other thing that really struck out to me in this story is that it all ends well. No shots fired. Everyone's good. All ends well. But the response of law enforcement was quite impressive, because the way these dudes get nabbed is an officer sees a vehicle that matches the description, full of guys, pulls them over at a traffic stop. When he confirms, with dispatch that he's got a vehicle that matches the description and all that, they send backup to him. And as they're pulling these dudes out of cars and questioning them, other officers are at the pharmacy reviewing the surveillance video footage. They're able to pass off the descriptions of the actual people, the 3 perpetrators that were in the pharmacy, to dispatch. Dispatch is able to relay that to the officers conducting the traffic stop, and they determine, yep, these dudes fit the description. Let's put them in cuffs. So I thought that was pretty good, I guess, example of how law enforcement can sometimes do some pretty good things quickly. They said that they sent out officers to to put up basically traffic roadblocks on major highways and thoroughfares. It also said they dispatched officers to all the other pharmacies in the area, because they figure if these guys hit one pharmacy, maybe they'll hit a second one. I just thought it was a pretty impressive response by Washington County Sheriff's Office, which is where St. George, Utah is. So I don't know if you had any other thoughts about that, Matthew, but maybe that happens every day and I just don't always hear about it, but I thought it was pretty impressive.
No, not always. And your point is really important, especially like, a lot of cops, when a situation like this happens, all the cops want to go and catch the vehicle, but it's really important for officer or officers to get to the scene and get good description. And if there's video and get all that information to relay it out, because oftentimes that's how you stop them, not just by casting this huge net, but by saying, hey, these are the guys, I recognize this car, this person or this vehicle. And then all of a sudden, like you start putting it out, and people say, oh, I know that guy, he lives over on this side of the town or whatever. And it is a coordinated thing where when everything's working together like that, it's awesome.
Yeah. Good work, Washington County.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps it up for us today, guys. Thank you for tuning in. A couple of important things before we let you go. Is today giveaway day? I always get confused.
It is, yes.
Okay.
We have a giveaway.
All right, so we have a giveaway, so we need to pull a winner. So here we go, guys. We're going to do that next. Now, before we get to the giveaway, though, just a reminder, today's episode is sponsored by CCW Safe, what we think is probably the best choice out there for coverage, self-defense related coverage in a legal incident related to your use of force in defense of yourself or others. Learn more at ccwsafe.com and use the coupon code CCPodcast to save on your new membership there. And also today's episode is brought to you by Fighting from Cover, our video-based training course available to stream or via DVD at concealedcarry.com/FFC. Go up your game and be prepared for every gunfight. Look at all the stories we listened to today. We're bouncing around in garages, around Jeeps. We got people on bicycles who got to deal with stuff. We got a guy who's bailing out of his car and shooting a loony walking down the highway. We got people who are ambushing someone at a door as they're trying to get back in their house after walking a dog. Cover is everywhere, and your correct and proper use of it could be the difference in you making it through in the gunfight. So learn more at concealedcarry.com/FFC. All right, Matthew. So what are we giving away today?
Today, we're giving away a Legal Boundaries by State book.
All right, Legal Boundaries by State. This is the top-selling product at concealedcarry.com right now. We're selling these things like wildfire, and you're really going to be glad you have it, especially if you're one of those places where you don't have internet service and you're driving down the road trying to decide what the laws are for that state you're about to drive into. So this is a great book. We'll get it shipped out to you as soon as we can. So, Matthew, who is our winner today?
Let me draw the winner here. We have Samantha D.
Samantha D.
Winner. Yeah.
D is in dog, big dog that scares away burglars. So Samantha D, you are the winner of the Legal Boundaries by State book. What are we giving away next week, Matthew?
The Concealed Carry Tactical Pen.
I have one right here.
Yes.
So the Concealed Carry Tactical Pen, glass-breaking, awesome pen. So this retail value about $10, and you can enter to win this and all of our weekly giveaways at concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. All one word. A reminder, you do have to enter every week. So if you've entered once and you're wondering why you never win, it's because you're no longer entered. Every week you got to go back and re-enter. Do that roughly between from Tuesday through Monday. That's kind of roughly your window each week to enter the giveaway. Just set an alarm or something on your calendar or something. Remember to do that every single week. And of course, tell your friends because maybe they'll win and they'll let you have it or something. I don't know. All right. So that's the story. Please, reminder, if you haven't already, subscribe to our podcast, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, and go and review it. Write a review. You can do that on iTunes, but obviously it's getting to the point today where a lot of the podcatchers from Google Play and all the other big players out there, they also allow you to write reviews. So if you listen to us on Spotify or TuneIn or wherever it might be, please write us a review and give us that feedback. And if you have any questions for us, feedback you want to send us or anything you'd like for us to talk about on the show, you can always email us at podcast@concealedcarry.com. That's it then. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Reminder to train often, train safe, and train right. So you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care, everyone. All right. There you have it. Matthew, thank you for being with me today. Thanks for the show.
Thank you, sir. It was great.
Everyone who's been with us today, thank you for joining us live. We appreciate that you want to take time out of your busy schedule to be with us here. We love the comments that you write in. We try and respond to those, and we think you guys add a lot to the show. So thank you for participating live. We really appreciate it. If you only participate live, though, I would strongly encourage you to go and actually subscribe to the audio feed of the podcast because we do have episodes on occasion. In fact, we had one last week that we did not record live. So the only way to listen to that episode is to go and subscribe to the audio feed. So if you haven't done that, make sure you do that as well. You can learn more at podcasts, that's plural, podcasts.concealedcarry.com. Podcast.concealedcarry.com. You can learn about all the shows in our network and subscribe there. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.